Deacon Jones Trophy is awarded to the best player in Black college football every year. We're going to have 4 finalists, but if I was the committee, it was just me, who would my 4 be and who would my winner be? Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode wraps up with another conversation slightly related to Willie Simmons, but I think that now that he's left FAMU, we should replace him in the Legacy Bowl. Now, prior to that, I have a double feature to kick off today's episode, and it's all about the Deacon Jones Award. It's all about the Black College Football MVP, Player of the Year, however you want to phrase it. I accept both, right? It's like card and cash. I'll take them both. But I have front runners, and I have secondary guys, I guess, so to speak, but it comes down to 4 finalists. To me, there are 2 guys who I legitimately will put at the front of the race. There's 2 other guys who I believe belong in the race, but I wouldn't say they're my 1 or my 2. So let's kick it off with the front runners. And I have Terrell Allen out of Tennessee State, the defensive lineman, who this year has a legitimate case for the FCS Defensive Player of the Year. And in a season like this, I think that should be enough for him to get this award. The reason I say that is because we've seen HBCU players win the is it called the Buck Buchanan? I think, yes, the Buck Buchanan. We've seen HBCU players win the Buck Buchanan before. We saw Isaiah Land do it just 2 years prior, and he got passed over for this award by Akil Glass, whose team was not as successful, and by a player who did not have the same standing nationally as Land did. That's why Allen is my guy, but I don't think he's the guy. I'll continue kind of pleading my case and, so to speak. But when I'm looking at the quarterback play over the year, that to me wasn't ridiculous. You didn't have great years number-wise. Somebody being the best defensive player in the nation, I think should get him a Black college football national, or I don't know why I keep wanting to say national championship, but a Black college football MVP Player of the Year award. Not just consideration, but the award. He doesn't have the most sacks in a game, in the season, because a player played 15 games and he played 11. And that player who had 15 games played had 15 sacks. Allen, who had 11 and a half sacks, 11 games, 11 and a half. Allen, who had 11 games played, had 14 and a half sacks. So he was way more prolific on a game-by-game basis. And if you just would have given him one more game, he likely would have been the leader. But it didn't matter about the gap when it came to tackles for a loss. He was in the lead with 28. This is a guy who was the most disruptive defensive lineman on the FCS level in 2023 by a pure numeric standard. That's the way I'm looking at it. You got to judge these guys off a lot of the numbers. And he's had dominant performances. It wasn't, you don't get 28 tackles for a loss in one game. You have to have multiple big games. And that's what Allen had. So I think he'll get the FCS Defensive Player of the Year if I follow what people tend to value. They tend to value sacks. They tend to value tackles for a loss. And he's high in both of those metrics. So I do think he gets it. Or maybe he'll be a finalist. I'll be surprised if he's not a finalist. I'll say that. If I just had to judge based off of history, I think that should be enough, but I know that it won't, because when you look at this award, it is a quarterback's award, just like every other player of the year, Heisman, MVP, the FCS. I think it's called the Jerry Rice is for freshman of the year, but whatever that is, these are quarterback awards because the quarterback is the most valuable player on the field. That's why I think Davius Richard is going to get it. When you go through the history of the Buck Buchanan, or excuse me, the Deacon Jones, there's so many names, I'm getting confused, but I'm just going to roll here. When you go to Black College Football MVP, the history of this award tells you they're going to give it to a quarterback. I just gave you an example in which Isaiah Land was the defensive player of the year, yet Aqeel Glass was able to get the award. He was the MVP. That just tells you offense is valued higher. Offense is just the more valuable commodity, and quarterback is the most valuable offensive commodity. So when you're the most valuable commodity on the most valuable commodity, most times you're going to be the one who gets this. As a matter of fact, I don't want to make it seem as if Richard didn't earn this. Richard does deserve it, right? I have Allen there because of what I value, and maybe I have a certain level of bias because I love the defensive side of the ball. Maybe I'm trying to fight for the underdog here. Or maybe I just feel like when you're that high nationally and you come into a subsection, it's a pretty obvious choice. But at the same time, it's not enough of a snub for me to be upset about it. Davius Richard has had a good year. I know that towards the end of the season, it didn't go the way that he wanted. There was a couple of games where he didn't perform like he wanted, especially in that playoff game where he ended up getting hurt. That was a bummer. I think that if he would have finished the playoff game the way he started the playoff game, then I would have understood, because you have your game against Campbell, you have a game against Elon, and then you have your game against Richmond. That's 3 big-time games in which you showed up in a big-time way. So either way, I'm not upset about it. I think he was the best quarterback in the MEAC this year. I don't think that quarterback play was great on a national scale from the HBCU level. But at the same time, when watching Richard, you could clearly tell he was a talented player, and this award was kind of being reserved for him, right? You could see it from the beginning of the season. Everybody knew this was his award to lose, and I don't think he did enough to lose it. I think that's really what it comes down to. I would pick Terrell Allen because of his national standing. But if we're honest with ourselves, and I'm all about being honest with ourselves on this show, if you want me to be honest with you, just let me know, and I'll do it. If we're being honest with ourselves, Davius Richard was written in pencil. Wasn't pen because anything could happen, but it was written in pencil that this was his award at the end of the year, and all he had to do was not lose it. He didn't lose it. And Terrell Allen probably didn't do enough to take it away from him. But we have to get to 4 finalists. So if it's not Allen, if it's not Richard, who else would it be? I have one person who maybe is considered a surprise, but if you ask me, it's kind of a no-brainer, and I'll get into that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and LinkedIn Jobs is the #1 place for all small business owners. If you run a small business and you're not on LinkedIn, you're failing yourself, you're failing your employees, and you're failing your business, because the way I view it is we want to make sure we get chemistry fits, because chemistry fits can take you to the next level. It's not just about getting this person, that person, this person, that person, and just saying, all right, you 5 individuals, you go be a team of individuals. No, you have to be a team that is cohesive, and that can be seen in your prospect on LinkedIn Jobs. All you have to do is post your job for free. That's FREE000 free at linkedin.com/locked-on college. There's over 800 million people who visit LinkedIn. You can find the right fit for you faster. Going to have your screening questions, but all you have to do is go to linkedin.com/locked-on-college. Post your job for free. That's linkedin.com/locked-on-college. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 all day, every day sports network on YouTube. It ain't gonna be the first for long because you see how we doing. I promise you, somebody's gonna try to be a copycat sooner or later. But go to Locked On Sports today and subscribe. Now, we're also going to continue rolling with our Deacon Jones Trophy finalists. Let me remind you, because I feel like this needs to be clearly articulated with no doubt. This is a Mouth of the South list. This is not the actual finalist. We don't know that yet. This is a Mouth of the South list where I'm telling you the 4 players that I would pick before I pick my one. And you know who my one would be. It'd be Terrell Allen. I've said that. But we've also gone through the front runners. We went through Allen. We went through Davius Richard, who I believe is going to win the award. But now what about the other 2? I don't necessarily consider these guys surprises, but I would be surprised if either one of them win. Let's kick it off with this one that really lets you know it's a Mouth of the South list. Ladarius Owens. Let's get a disclaimer out the way. I'm not a homer. Anytime I am a homer, I let you know. But a lot of times when people don't agree with your opinion, they look for the quickest way to discredit you. Not just to say I don't agree because of whatever. They look for the quickest way to discredit you. And for many people, when I'm talking about a Texas Southern player that I believe deserved more praise than he got, they'll point to this flag that's behind me and say, well, you're a Texas Southern alum. You're biased. And maybe you're right, but be honest, you're not. Because I identify when I'm being biased, and I'll tell you, this ain't one of those times. What this could be is, if you want to just disagree, we can talk about it. It's more than likely you valuing the team success of Jeremy Musa over the individual success of Ladarius Owens. Because when you compare the individual success, it ain't close. When you compare the team success, it ain't close. But in an individual award, I'm going with Ladarius Owens, the individual winner, over Jeremy Musa, the team winner. But why am I even speaking on Musa? Why am I even sharing the spotlight that deserves to be on Owens with Jeremy Musa if Musa is not a part of my 4? I feel the need to validate this because, like I said, when people don't agree, they reach for the quickest way to discredit you. I value a certain level of criteria, and he didn't win the SWAC Offensive Player of the Year because they didn't value that set of criteria. That you can't tell me any different. You can't tell me when you look at the numbers. You can't tell me when you look at Ladarius Owens, who is 6th in the nation in rushing yards. You can't tell me when you look at Ladarius Owens, who is 4th in the nation in rushing yards per game. You can't sit here and tell me that he didn't have a better statistical year for his position than Jeremy Musa did for his position. Owens was the best offensive player in the SWAC this year. And just because the SWAC doesn't acknowledge that doesn't mean that I won't acknowledge it. And by acknowledging that, I'll say that he deserves to be a Deacon Jones Trophy finalist. I'm valuing those individual things. If you want to call me a homer, then call me a homer. I'm going to tell you, naysayer, please. I know exactly why I feel this way. I know exactly the numbers that if you want to have a conversation, I'm bringing up. And it's a short one. It's a short one. Do you acknowledge these numbers as fact? If you can't, then nothing to say. Secondly, do you value team success or individual success in this? Boom. I'm going to know exactly where you stand there. If you value individual success, I would ask you why you think Jeremy Musa had a better individual season. And I hate that this kind of turned into me putting my cape on and saying that I think Ladarius Owens should have been this, that, and the third, but it was required because you might ask, how could a player who didn't win Offensive Player of the Year in the SWAC on a FCS level end up winning this award? That's why. Because I don't agree with the criteria, and the people in the SWAC who voted are not the people who are voting for this. They may look at it the same way that I do, because there's a lot of people who do. There's a lot of people who don't. I don't mind that, but my criteria is the one that I value, and the one that you value is the one that you do. Now, that being said, my last slot, I just felt I was on the fence. I really had about 5 players, but I knew I had to narrow it down to 4, excuse me. So I had to choose between Isaiah Major and Jada Byers. I ended up saying, you know what, let's get some Division II representation here. And it was a tough one. Like it was a legit tough one. If it came down to it and I heard that it was Allen, Richard, Owens, and Major, I ain't complaining. I'm not complaining. But for me, I said, I got to go with this running back because I'm going to go with what I know they like. If I'm going to throw Owens in there, that's going to be my only radical one. I'm going to go ahead and go with Byers, another running back, another offensive player who, because of injury, he didn't have the greatest year. But he was still top 10 in rushing yards per game in Division II, the nation, right? You see kind of the common thread of the guys that I really like for this award. It's what they've done comparatively beyond HBCUs, because when you stack up, first off, when you stack up nationally, most times you lead HBCUs. Like let's just be real about it, because HBCUs are a subsection of the FCS. Because they're not an entity that I can really qualify. They're not a conference. They're split up into multiple conferences. So I'll say subsection. It's a group within the FCS. So it's not separate. And when you're nationally ranked in the top 5, top 10, most times you're ranked number 1 when it comes to HBCUs in your conference. I don't think there was any conference, SWAC, MEAC, OVC, CAA, anything that had multiple players in the top 10 from that conference. The closest thing we got was Terrell Allen and Kelby Givens, who are both top 10 in tackles for a loss. That's the closest we got, right? Givens had a great year too, by the way. But that being said, Byers, he played well. And there was only one game in which he finished that he didn't score a touchdown. And you had a game like the one against Lincoln where, yeah, he didn't get a lot of yards, but he had 5 touchdowns on 14 touches. That's a touchdown every 3 times he touched the ball. He had one on the receiving side of things on just 2 catches. Then he had 12 rushes and had 4 touchdowns in that. So it wasn't a lot of yards, but it was a whole lot of touchdown production. And other than the game where he got hurt, it was the game he returned and he didn't score a touchdown in that game. Actually, I think he scored a touchdown in the game he got hurt. But it was those 2 games that really hurt his rushing average because he got hurt in one, so he didn't get to finish. And then the other one, he was returning from injury, and you could tell he was shaking back. But as soon as he shook back, he had back-to-back 200-yard games. Jada Byers is a dog. Jada Byers is a really good player, and I can't wait to see him come back for a senior season and see what he does, because he's ranked near the top of the nation 2 years in a row. Going into his senior year, he'll probably be able to do that again. And hopefully he's able to stay healthy as well. Jada Byers, Ladarius Owens, 2 running backs who I don't think are going to win this award, but I think that they're real reasonable candidates, and I wouldn't be mad at them if they were to win. But let's move forward with something that's probably, it might be, I don't think it should be controversial, but it might make people kind of scrunch their face up at first. I believe that it's time to remove Willie Simmons from the Legacy Bowl now that he's at Duke. And I think that Bubba McDowell from Prairie View A&M should be his replacement coach. And I'll break down both of those things as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We've gone through the Deacon Jones Trophy finalists that I would pick. Last clarification, this is a Mouth of the South list. But now I want to switch it up. Now I want to look at, we know that Willie Simmons is gone, and I think I might kick off next week. I think I might kick off next week or close out this week, one of the two, I'm not sure, with some of the candidates for FAMU. But right now, there's another piece of work that needs to be done that's not Rattler specific. Now, last time I checked, I didn't see this be clarified yet, but I think the Legacy Bowl should remove Willie Simmons. And this isn't about eradicating him. I don't want it to be treated as the same way that when Prime left. When Prime left, there was a lot of disdain. There was a lot of irritation from non-Jackson State people, from the HBCU community, period. I want to make that very clear. There was a lot of people who they didn't want him nowhere near it. There's a lot of people who never touched the Jackson State campus that anytime he mentions an HBCU, they got a problem. We should not treat Willie Simmons with that. I want to say shout out to every single person. I didn't see many people really get mad at Willie Simmons in my comments yesterday, and I loved that, man. Like, that made me extremely happy to see the comments and to read the love that was still being shown to Willie Simmons. Shout out to y'all who showed the love to me too, but the attitude towards Willie Simmons' departure was one of love and support, and I liked that. Like, I really did. I don't want to go against that by saying he shouldn't be a part of this. I just don't think that he meets the qualifications any longer. He did when he was given that position, but he's not the FAMU coach anymore. He's not an HBCU coach anymore. And that's the difference between him and Chennis Berry. Chennis Berry left Benedict College. So he, in a way, he wasn't really representing the SWAC any longer. And I commented on that, but I wasn't bothered by it. I didn't want him to be gone. It was just like, okay, he's not really representing Benedict. He's not really repping the SWAC, but at the same time, he's still repping an HBCU, so we'll overlook it. Willie Simmons is no longer repping the SWAC. He's no longer repping FAMU. He is now at Duke, so he's not even an HBCU coach, and he's not even a head coach. So whose staff would he really be bringing? You know, like, he's still good in Tallahassee. He's still good on FAMU campus. He's still good here. If somebody told me that Willie Simmons wanted an interview, I say, oh yeah, let's do it. With a lot of excitement. I just don't think he meets the qualifications for this specific event, because as much as the HBCU Legacy Bowl is meant to highlight the draft prospects, and that's the number one purpose of it, I also believe that it highlights HBCU coaches. And that's just not something that Willie Simmons is any longer. And I think that should be easy to understand. And I try to make sure that I clarify this, because I don't want it to be as if I'm showing any kind of hate towards Willie Simmons, because I really do like Willie Simmons. But the person who should replace him is Bubba McDowell, and there's a clear precedent that has been set for this. There's a clear precedent that's been set for this. And I back it up real quick. If FAMU has a new coach, what they should by that time, I don't think I bring that guy in either. Even if it is just a guy from within that they decided to bring up, maybe then you do it. But if FAMU hires an outside coach, I do not believe that coach should come in and be the Legacy Bowl coach. No, sir. No, ma'am. I believe that it should be Bubba McDowell. And there is a clear precedent that is set for this. Actually, the SWAC has never had the Celebration Bowl representative come in and be a coach at the Legacy Bowl. The SWAC champion head coach has never been the head coach or a coach at this event. Now, granted, it was Deion Sanders both times, and he decided to pass on it both times. One, he was still at Jackson State. The other, he had moved on to Colorado by that time. Okay, whatever. Reasons aside, I don't know why he never did it. I don't know. But I do know that he never did it, and they had a way around it each time. The first time, ironically, it was Willie Simmons, who was the coach of the second best team in the SWAC. Wasn't the SWAC championship runner-up, but he was the second best in that conference when you're looking at what FAMU was in 2021. Now, in 2022, they went with Eric Dooley. Eric Dooley was the head coach of Southern at the time. I don't know if maybe Dooley leaving PV had a reason on why he didn't do the Legacy Bowl, even though he went to Southern. I don't know. But Dooley technically had made back-to-back SWAC championships. But the thing was, Dooley in 2022 was the SWAC runner-up. Southern was the SWAC runner-up. So they brought in their staff. Well, in 2023, the second best record in the conference belongs to Prairie View A&M. Right? If you're just talking about conference record, overall to be Eddie Robinson, and that'll be Alabama State, who I also wouldn't mind seeing, to be honest. But Bubba McDowell and Prairie View A&M had the second best conference record, and they also were the SWAC championship runner-ups. I personally, and they beat Alabama State in the last week of the season. So all of those things, let's go ahead and give it to Bubba McDowell. Let's go ahead and give it to Prairie View A&M. I believe that is who should be the SWAC coaching representative in the Legacy Bowl. Let me know what you think. This was an interesting episode. This was a very fun episode, and I enjoyed it. I'll be back tomorrow, but in the meantime, make sure you're making Locked On Sports Today your second listen of the day. I think we're going to get into the Bethune-Cookman recruiting class on tomorrow. I'm not sure what else, but more than likely that will be the first segment of tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, in between time, though, till we get there, you can follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with the S, ends in the S. Till next time we hear each other, family. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.